I'm Christopher Morris, and been a photographer since the early 80s. I was known as a conflict photographer through the 80s and 90s, and around 2000 I switched careers and I became more of a political photographer. I was assigned to the White House. I did that for a good 7 years, 8 years, and since that I've shifted my role more into a commercial end and into the fashion. I experiment with a lot of video work. I use the 5D, 7D, and the Mark IV for all my video work. All of these cameras are phenomenal. There's so much in TV and on the internet, and I'm trying to separate my little pieces that I produce from everything else. And I find that if I did them in color, they just fall to the side, I think. And the black and white gives them a much more timely historical feel. All the films that I've done, they're shorts, they're like these personal documents of feelings I've had. I've made 4 short films on Obama. The first one was Obama's Burden. It was when the president was going to make his decision on continuing the war in Afghanistan, about troop deployment. And it was on Veterans Day, and he had a big meeting in his cabinet room to decide. And before he made that decision, he went to Arlington Cemetery. I love the tilt shift lenses that Canon has. So I'm shooting with a 45 tilt shift. It's an architectural lens. So I crank it all the way either over left or right or up and down a little. And what it does, it throws everything out of focus except for a certain area. It kind of tunnel visions the viewer to what you're trying to get them to focus on. I have a real preference for my still photography. I'm still in love with the Mark III DS. I always work in silent mode with the camera. I turn the motor drive off. I try to slow my mind down. It's really amazing, the camera on quiet mode. It's a kind of an unknown feature that very few photographers use. I do a pre-composition, so once I've picked up this Mark III DS with a 24-70. Once I've picked that up, whoever I'm trying to photograph, I don't want to disturb that. I need to capture somebody without me creating the picture by causing some change in the person. I don't want the person to know I'm taking their photograph. Where if I pick it up with the motor drive and tick, 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 and I fire off a bunch of frames, they hear it and it's almost like you're assaulting the person. I use almost religiously the 24-70 zoom, 2.8. Fantastic lens. What I like about it, it gives me a beautiful contrast. It almost has a buttery quality to it. It's very sharp. Some of the work I'm most proud of is the work I did for the book My America. One of my favorite photos, it's a photograph of a lone Secret Service agent standing amongst 4 trees. He's almost like a tree himself. It's this man in a black suit. I've literally had around 3 to 4 seconds to make the frame because I'm in a motorcade traveling with the president. So I'm running to get into the motorcade. There's a helicopter landing nearby. I've got agents yelling at me, don't stop, keep going. But when you look at the photograph, it's very quiet. I have this one camera, one lens, this Mark III DS that I've used basically for the last 5 years or so. I know the camera, and that way I can capture that slice of time very quickly. I'm going to do a new book next year, and there's one of my favorite photos from that book is there's a woman sitting in a chair staring at an open door. And again, it's something that's very fast. I was actually traveling with John McCain, and the motorcade drove past it. We arrived at the event, and I saw this woman out the window, and it's 100 meters away, and I get out and I forget about the candidate. I want that photograph. That has a lot more time value to me than a picture of John McCain. So I leave the candidate and run all the way back and find this woman. But when I drove past it, I already had framed my composition. And while I'm running back, I'm praying that she's still there, because to me it was so unique, and it became one of my favorite images. Back in 2000, I was watching television at night in my room and trying to think how to photograph differently politics. and there was a film on some 1940s boxing match. And I noticed that you could watch the photographers the way they were moving, and nobody's taking a picture because they have the flash bulbs. And all of a sudden, when the punch would come in, you would see 5, 6 photographers, boom, one frame. Then you would see them all put the cameras down. They would leave the action because they have to reload. They would load in another film, load in another flash, bring the camera up, and now wait again. Boom. And that's where I learned to put away the motor drives, put away the speed, and slow me down to think of as a view camera and appreciate every frame. And what it does, it transformed my photography. It made me into 100% better of a photographer.